You know the sound. That old screen door slapping shut behind you, and it never seemed to matter how fast you moved through it. By August, the flypaper hanging over the kitchen table had gone solid black, curled up with a week's worth of catch. Mosquitoes stacked against every window pane at dusk, and the flies always found the pie before you did. Every mountain family fought that same war, summer after summer, and nobody really won it. Then one hot August I stepped into my grandfather's cabin, and the door stood wide open to the porch. No screen on it, no can of spray on the shelf, no smoke, no netting over the beds. And not one bug inside, not a fly circling the lamp, not a gnat in the sugar. I stood there in the doorway just waiting on something to land on me, and nothing did. Whatever he'd rigged up cost him about $1 and lived right in the doorway. But to understand why that was near impossible, you've got to see what the rest of us were fighting. And what we were fighting could turn a whole summer mean. Flies didn't just pester you. They walked across the meat you'd worked all week to put up, and where they walked, they laid. A few blowflies could ruin a fresh cut of pork in an afternoon. The ants found the sugar barrel and moved in by the thousands, a black rope of them running up the wall to the lid. Gnats drowned themselves in the milk pail overnight, and you'd skim them off or drink them, no third choice. Worst of all were the mosquitoes. Out in those hollows they carried fever, and one bad season could put a child flat in bed. An unsealed cabin in July filled up like a bucket left out in the rain, every warm month bringing a fresh wave through the logs and the eaves. But those swarms weren't wandering in at random. Nearly every one slipped through the exact same gap, so the whole fight always came down to one spot. That spot was the door, and not for the reason most folks guessed. Everybody blamed the window cracks and the gaps between the logs, and sure, a few crawled through there. But the door was a wide, warm, open invitation, and bugs read it plain. Every time you pushed it, a puff of cabin air rolled out past you, carrying the smell of bacon grease, ripe fruit, and sweet milk straight down the mountain breeze. Insects hunt by that. A mosquito follows the warmth and breath of a living body. A fly tracks a food smell from a good ways off. A doorway leaks all of it at once, then stands open 2, 3, 4 seconds, while somebody hauls in firewood or a water bucket. Cracks let in a trickle. A working door opened 40 times a day was a river. So folks threw everything they had at that doorway. Money, chemicals, contraptions, and here's the part that stings. Almost none of it held. Take the screen door first. Looks solid on the porch, but the corners never sit flush, and a mosquito only needs a gap the width of a pencil lead to slip through. You slam it a few hundred times over a summer, and the frame warps, so now you've got a screen that keeps out the breeze and lets in the gnats. The sprays wore off by supper. That fresh can smell fades in about 4 hours, and the second it's gone the flies are back like they'd been waiting on the fence post. Foggers were worse. They'd choke the room with a chemical haze that stung your eyes, then settle on the counters, while bugs marched right back in under the door you never sealed. And citronella? The bugs quit minding it by July, once they got used to the smoke. Grandpa spent close to nothing, and he never once lost this fight. While everyone else was squinting at labels, Grandpa was watching the bugs themselves, and he'd caught on to something the chemical companies never bothered to explain. Here's what he figured out sitting on that porch. A bug doesn't see your doorway the way you do. Its eyes are near useless for that at any real distance. What it's got instead is a pair of antennae covered in thousands of tiny receptors, and it reads the air the way a hound reads the ground. Warmth, sweat, ripe fruit, the crumbs under your table, all of it drifts out the door on the moving air and lays down an invisible trail. The bug lands on the edge of that trail and just follows it upstream, correcting left and right, homing in on the source. It's not wandering in by luck. It's being led, straight to your kitchen, every single time. Think about what that means. Ceiling cracks never touch the real problem, because the problem was never the hole. It was the signal pouring out of it. If a smell was what pulled them in, then the right smell could turn them right back around, and the mountains were already full of it. Walk any Appalachian hollow in summer, and you're stepping over the answer. Pennyroyal, a low mint that creeps along damp trail edges, throws off an oil called pelargone that mosquitoes and fleas won't cross. Tansy, with those flat yellow button flowers, was hung in doorways and packed around meat for generations because flies and ants can't stand it. Then there's the black walnut. Its leaves and hulls carry a compound that flies and beetles steer clear of, which is why old-timers rub the leaves on horses to keep the biting flies off. And mountain mint, growing wild in the fence rows, puts out a scent so sharp it scatters ticks, gnats, and mosquitoes alike. 4 plants, and not one of them cost a dime. They were already growing within a short walk of the cabin door, doing the exact work those foggers only pretended to. But knowing which plants bugs hate is only half of it. Gather them the wrong way, and you'll draw bugs than you ever drive off. Here's where most folks trip up before they even start. They rip off a big handful of green stems, still full of sap, and hang the whole wet mess over the door. Inside a few days, that bundle starts to sweat and mold from the inside out, and mold smells sweet. To a fly or a gnat, sweet means dinner, so you've just built yourself a bait station. The fix is patience. You cut your plants and let them dry slow in a shady, airy spot for about 2 weeks, until the stems snap instead of bend. Dry stems hold their bite. Wet ones lose it and turn traitor. Then there's the timing, and this is the part that ruined it for the neighbors. They'd wait till July, when the cabin was already crawling, and by then, you're not repelling bugs, you're negotiating with a mob. You want the thing up before they ever show. Get the drying and the timing right, and you're finally ready for the one thing that made Grandpa's setup actually work, exactly where he put it. Because here's what nobody tells you. A bug coming through a doorway doesn't fly in up high near the frame. It crosses low, right through that narrow band of air at the sill, usually within 6 inches of the floor, following the cool draft that leaks under the door. So it doesn't matter how strong your herbs are if you hang them up top like a wreath. All that scent drifts to the ceiling and sits in dead air, doing nothing, while every ant, fly, and skeeter walks in under it untouched. Off to the side is just as useless. You've got to put the repellent square in the lane they're forced to travel. That's the whole game. Not the porch, not the window, not a spray you missed around the room. One precise spot at the threshold, guarded by about $1 worth of dried plant. He'd tie the whole thing together every spring for about the price of a loaf of bread, and once you see what it was, you'll wonder how it ever got forgotten. Now that $1 didn't buy much at the general store, and it didn't need to. A little ball of cotton twine, the kind that came off a spool by the yard for pennies. That was the only thing he ever paid for. Everything else came off the mountain for free. The rest was a handful of those dried stems we've been talking about, bundled tight while they still held their oils. No jars, no chemicals, no gadget with batteries. Just plant, string, and the know-how of when to hang it. And the timing was a ritual with him. He'd have it tied and set before the first truly warm week of spring. That stretch when the nights finally quit dipping cold and the first bugs start testing the air. Beat them to the door and they never settle in. So here it is, the whole secret, laid out plain, exactly the way he did it. You take 3 plants and no more. Dried pennyroyal, dried tansy, and a good handful of black walnut leaf. All cut when they're at their strongest and hung upside down till they're crisp. Bind them tight at the stems with a bit of twine. Stems up, leaves down, so the whole thing hangs like a little broom of the mountains. Then you hang it right in the open doorway, up at head height, dead center where a body would walk through. Not off to the side, not tucked in a corner. Center, high, in the moving air. Last thing, you pull a few extra leaves off, crush them rough between your palms till the oils come up sharp, and you rub them straight along the wooden doorsill, low where the boards meet. Now the scent hangs floor to ceiling across the one stretch of air every crawling and flying thing has to cross to get inside. Simple as it looks, there's a reason it beats a can of spray every single time, and it comes down to how a bug's own body works against it. Pennyroyal and tansy both grow wild across a lot of these hills, along old fence lines and sunny field edges, and they'll take over a garden corner if you let 'em. Black walnut you likely already know by the tree, so you just gather leaves in mid to late summer when the oils run heaviest. No wild patch nearby? A seed packet runs about $1, and one season gives you more than a doorway ever needs. Drying's the easy part. Tie small bunches, hang 'em stems up in a dark, airy spot for a week or two till they crackle. Damp leaves mold and quit working, so you want 'em bone dry before you bind the final bundle. Freshen it about every 3 to 4 weeks through the warm months. Just crush a few leaves to wake the scent back up, or swap in a new bundle when the old one fades to hay. Call it $1 in seed and a few minutes of your time all season. Follow those steps and it works. But why it works is stranger than Grandpa ever let on. A bug doesn't find your door with its eyes. It follows a scent trail, warmth and food, and the smell of a place worth crawling into, reading the air with receptors finer than anything we've got. Those dried leaves are packed with volatile oils, and once they hit the air, they don't just smell strong to us. They flood the bug's receptors and jam 'em. The trail it was following just vanishes under a wall of pennyroyal and tansy, so it can't fix on the opening at all. The door's wide open, and the bug simply can't tell where in is. And here's the part that beats the bottle. A contact poison has to touch the bug, and once it dries on the sill, it's done working. A scent barrier keeps throwing off oil into the air for weeks, doing its job on every bug that comes near, without ever having to land a hit. The doorway was solved, but a cabin has more ways in than one, and Grandpa had a quiet answer for each of them. The same idea travels anywhere air moves. On the window ledges, Grandpa laid down thinner bundles, half the size of the door ones, since a cracked sash lets in a trickle, not a flood. He tucked a wad of dried tansy up in the chimney draft too, where the warm air rising all day carried that bitter smell down into the room. The root cellar hatch got its own little sachet, hung right at the seam where the cool, damp air slipped through. Down there he leaned on mint and wormwood, since they hold up better in the cold than the softer herbs do. And he rotated them. A bundle throws its strongest scent for about 3 to 4 weeks, then fades, so he'd crush the old one to wake it up one last time, then swap in fresh. Put it all together, and you end up right back where we started, standing in a cabin where the bugs just don't come in. So the promise held. $1 worth of dried mountain herbs at the threshold, refreshed every few weeks, outguarded a whole shelf of sprays and plug-ins that cost 30 or 40 times as much. No fumes, no dead bug sills to sweep, no running to town when the can ran dry. Grandpa never called it a trick. To him, it was just what you did, the way you'd bank a fire or salt a hog, passed down till it felt like common sense. If you've got a use for the old ways that still earn their keep, stick around. There's plenty more where this came from. Every can on that store shelf promised to kill bugs on contact, and the one doorway in these mountains that never let a single one through never saw a drop of the stuff.